I'm here today to announce that the program known as DACA that was effectuated under the Obama administration is being rescinded.
A big change in immigration enforcement policy this past week. Attorney General Jeff Sessions says so-called dreamers will no longer be exempt from deportation. But the president says this is not the whole story.
Hopefully now Congress will be able to help them and do it properly.
Fresh tears, new fears, and the American dream. Tonight on Politics Unplugged. And good evening. I'm political editor Dennis Welch, and this is Politics Unplugged. And it was just last Tuesday morning that Attorney General announced that DACA would be rescinded, but giving Congress 6 months to come up with a way to protect those so-called dreamers. Now, just as background, in essence, DACA allows certain illegal immigrants who entered the country as minors to receive a renewable 2-year period of deferred action from deportation and eligibility for a work permit. Now, several states have threatened to sue the government over DACA, saying that President Obama had no right to issue that order. Arizona was not one of those states, but earlier this week, Attorney General Mark Brnovich told us he does believe this is an issue that Congress should have solved a long time ago.
The president can't unilaterally rewrite immigration law. In fact, President Obama himself used to say he's not a king, he's not a king. And so what's happened historically is that this issue has become very politicized, and a lot of stuff's done that really doesn't pass constitutional muster. So hopefully this time Congress will do it right, so there isn't all this uncertainty. So when it comes to driver's license or issues with in-state tuition versus whether what the dreamers have to pay or not pay, those issues will be resolved if Congress acts.
And just this past Friday, Mr. Brnovich had another big announcement about both DACA and another big issue, college tuition. And he sat down with us exclusively, and here's what he had to say. Big news this week, a lot of people talking about DACA recipients, the so-called dreamers that were brought here as children by their parents. A lot of people want to know what's your plan on dealing with them on in-state tuition moving forward here in Arizona. You've got a deadline to act on that. That deadline is tomorrow. What are you doing?
Let me first start by saying that, I'm a big believer in immigration reform, and Congress needs to address this issue. As a first-generation American, no one is more sympathetic to the plight of children that were brought here throughout any fault of their own. So that is something that Congress needs to address. That being said, as the Attorney General, my job is to enforce Arizona law as it is. Arizona voters, a decade ago, passed Proposition 300 by 70%, nearly or about 1 million votes, that said that they did not want in-state tuition to be provided to folks that didn't have lawful status here. That's the law. There's also federal laws that have implications for us as a state and how we charge tuition and what we can and what we can't charge based on federal law. So it put me, quite frankly, in a very difficult position because on the one hand, you have a very sympathetic group of folks. I agree that we should be doing everything we can to make education affordable and accessible to as many people as we can. I understand that. But I also have to deal with the realities of the laws here in Arizona, and based on not only the law, but the fact that our office won a decision at the Court of Appeals, we had to proceed accordingly.
So you were moving forward with a lawsuit to stop the Board of Regents, the schools, from charging in-state tuition or allowing these so-called DACA recipients, or these so-called dreamers and DACA recipients from getting the benefit of paying in-state tuition, correct?
What we did, we filed a lawsuit on Friday that basically said this is part of a bigger and broader question about accessibility in education here in Arizona. So what we did is if we initiated a lawsuit against the Board of Regents basically saying that not only do they have to follow the statute dealing with DACA recipients, but our Constitution mandates and requires that education be nearly as free as possible. So as we started looking at our options, what we could or maybe should or shouldn't do regarding Proposition 300 and DACA recipients, I kept coming back to this fundamental question. I kept hearing folks talking about we need to make education accessible. I heard, the presidents of the university talking about the founding of our state and how they wanted everyone to be educated. I thought, that's all true. But why is everyone focusing on one group of people and not focusing on the broader constitutional question? What is the Board of Regents doing to make education nearly as free as possible? And when we started looking at that question, I had our folks looking at it, I started realizing that tuition here in Arizona has risen 9 to 10 times faster over the last 15 years than the rate of inflation. What has happened, even since I went to Arizona State University, Dennis, when I went to ASU, tuition, I think, was $600 or $625 a semester, and now it's gone through the roof. It's more than $10,000. So, as a middle-class parent with kids ready to go to college, I keep coming back to the basic question: are we doing everything we can to follow the Constitution and our state law when it comes to making education nearly as free as possible?
Yeah, and I saw that in the lawsuit that you were charging. That some of the numbers that you put in there are pretty incredible. It's over 320, I think, to 370% increases in tuition over the past number of years there. So what do you want to remedy this? How moving forward, what would you like to see happen at the end of the day?
Well, I think the Board of Regents has a policy when they consider how they calculate tuition. It's not based on actual cost. It's not even based on making something nearly as free as possible. Once again, they keep coming back to this formula about accessibility, and there's really three primary factors they use. They look at one, the cost at other universities is. Two, they look at the availability of loans and other student aid. And three, they look at family median income. And to me, you look at those three things, that leaves out a huge portion and doesn't go back to that first principle out, what is nearly as free as possible. So I think the Board of Regents, if they want to, or the university presidents want to lecture us or anyone else in the state about, hey, we need to make education accessible, I couldn't agree more. But what I want to tell the universities and the Board of Regents is, okay, are you truly making it accessible? And if so, how do you account for these skyrocketing costs? How do you account for the skyrocketing tuition over the last 15 years?
Do you think the presidents are being hypocritical on this issue then?
Oh, absolutely. I think what you have is a bunch of ivory tower eggheads that make these decisions, and they realize the impact that it has on everyday hardworking Arizona taxpayers. And so this stuff doesn't happen in a bubble. And we, over the last decade or so, our tuition here at our state universities has risen faster than any other state. I mean, so those are fundamental questions we need to start asking is, with that basic constitutional provision, are we making education nearly as free as possible? The issue of accessibility, as the presidents have talked about. Once you go to that question, then you have to ask yourself, well, why should we, or why as a parent, should the amount of loans my kid gets factor into how much they pay for tuition? Quite frankly, I think you can make an argument that that's what's led to some of these skyrocketing costs.
So with this lawsuit, do you want the presidents, then the universities, to start cutting tuition, or what do you want?
Absolutely. I think one is we hear about how much the university says it has to charge or what it needs to charge. My basic question is, well, what is the actual cost? And that's one thing. We keep hearing from the Board of Regents and from other people about what the tuition should or shouldn't be. But if you look at their own factors, their own criteria for setting that tuition, then it's like I said, they look at other universities. Well, what does the University of Michigan charge? What does the University of Alabama charge? Both with way better football teams than my alma mater, ASU, I will add. They look at things like family income. They look at the availability of student loans, student aid. And my question is, well, why are you looking at all that stuff instead of looking at what are the actual costs? What are the expenses? What is ASU spending all this money on? If you look at our pleadings, we actually have a chart in there, which once again, I have our folks doing research. And if you look at, in the last 15 years, there is almost a fairly straight line, slight increases in tuition before that. But in the last 15 years, it goes almost straight up. So what we have seen is we've seen a dramatic spike in the amount of tuition parents are having to pay here. And I will add, it's not only parents, it's, there's a lot of folks that are returning to school. So there's been a dramatic spike in tuition with no correlation to the rate of inflation, and quite frankly, it doesn't even correlate to legislative cuts.
Well, have you talked to the A-Board, have you talked to the university presidents and asked them to justify these tuition increases?
Well, this is the thing. As we started to move forward on this case, we had sent the Board of Regents a letter last month asking them to explain what they were doing in regards to tuition for the DACA recipients. And as part of that letter, they had talked about the fact that they wanted to make sure that education was accessible, and as the few months here have led on since our victory at the Court of Appeals, I've heard the presidents talk a lot about accessibility. I've heard the university presidents, there was a column or article just this week in the newspaper with the university presidents talking about what the purpose of the founders of our state was in the Constitution. And I kept coming back to this principle, is that they're lecturing us, or they're telling us that they know best. They know which laws are going to apply to them or not, and they know what the Constitution means or not. And so by filing this lawsuit, what we want to see happen is we want to see the universities, the Board of Regents, put their cards on the table and explain how they are coming up with these numbers and how they come up with this notion of affordability, when affordability is not the constitutional standard. The constitutional standard is nearly as free as possible. Are they meeting that standard? the courts will decide.
Yeah, and I guess a lot of people watching this tonight, people, parents out there getting ready to send their kids to school, who's going to wonder at the end of the day what this might mean for them. What would something like this mean for them? Because from what I'm hearing is this lawsuit is just like, look, tell us what to justify these costs. But is there any? Are you going after any kind of remedies here? Is your office seeking to force them to lower tuition rates or anything like that?
What I think we need to do is we need to see the actual numbers and facts and figures, and we want the universities, the Board of Regents, to not base their tuition on what's being charged at the University of Michigan or how much someone could get in student loans. That shouldn't be the proper criteria. So we do want them to change their criteria. And two, I think we, as tax-paying citizens in Arizona, have a right to know how much the actual costs are at the universities and what their expenses are. And and if they want to talk about needing more money or increasing tuition, then I think they need to justify that by showing, well, here's what we're spending the money on, and here's why that doesn't meet our needs, and we need to raise tuition. Because just from a outsider's perspective, when I hear the university presidents of the Board of Regents talk about accessibility and making it affordable, I ask myself, well, wait a minute, why is it then we've taken this dramatic spike? And I think anybody that's lived here in Arizona long enough, I went to high school here, went to ASU as an undergraduate, I keep hearing the same thing from a lot of my friends, from people like on my daughter's sports teams. They keep coming back to, oh my goodness, do you see how expensive ASU is now? And so I think that there's been a dramatic increase, and there needs to be an explanation for that.
Also, I want to get back real quick to the DACA recipients there. What do you want to happen, or do you think this is going to sort itself out over the next 6 months?
Well, I think that once again, the university has to operate consistent within the law. And so my question is there's a law, there's a statute on the books that was approved by 70% of the Arizona voters. It was just upheld by our Court of Appeals. And why isn't the university following what the law requires? And two, I think there's a secondary question. If you read the concurring opinion in that case, Judge Norris points out that there's actually federal statutes that say that if you aren't in compliance or you're allowing this sort of bifurcated or the same amount of tuition, that you could run into a situation where it's a conflict with federal law, and then you'd actually have to charge everyone the same amount of tuition or that out-of-state tuition. You couldn't charge them that discounted rate of in-state tuition. So what the Board of Regents are doing, once again, is they're gambling with making tuition not only affordable but nearly as free as possible by jeopardizing the ability of the universities to charge in-state tuition by their reckless actions.
All right. Well, thanks a lot for joining us here today. And
Thank you.
Yeah, big news.
Thank you.
And more on the DACA ruling just ahead, including a closer look at those young people who will be affected.
We're talking about young people who know no other country except the United States.
What the ruling could mean for those dreamers in school, on the job, and now facing deportation right after the break. And President Donald Trump, he's siding with Democrats on a debt deal. A closer look at what the president gains by crossing the aisle. Still ahead.
They are going to be thrilled when they see what we have in store for them. That's amazing.
The Arizona's Family Surprise Squad is powered by Valley Toyota dealers and only on 3TV.
Planet Fitness is celebrating 25 years. Join now through September 13th for just 25 cents and then $10 a month. No commitment. Join the one and only judgment-free zone for just 25 cents. Today is a perfect day to start. Just 25 cents down and then $10 a month. No commitment. The world judges. We don't. Planet Fitness. Be free.
Here at the Nava Law Firm, we are passionate about fighting for you and your rights. When we take a client's case, we understand what's at stake. We want to help you, and we can help you. I've successfully defended hundreds of cases over the years. I'm determined to fight for you. Every defendant has rights, and we have the experience to protect those rights. No matter what charges you're facing, you don't have to do this alone. Call us today for a free consultation regarding your case.
Church's Chicken presents...
Okay, Dave, time to choose which chicken and 2 sides you want in your $5 real big deal.
Original chicken.
Now choose 2 sides.
Baked mac and cheese.
And?
Baked mac and cheese.
Huh?
I want 2 sides of mac and cheese. Is that okay?
I couldn't care less, Dave.
Oh, thank you. Yeah!
Choose your chicken. Any 2 sides of biscuit and jalapeno for just $5 at Church's Chicken.
So I think naming our store The Dump might have been the stupidest business decision I've ever made. Or maybe really smart.
We're called The Dump because they're great manufacturers that needed to get rid of product, and they dumped it on us.
Immediately see savings all over on every tag.
I love to hear people say, I didn't know you had this nice a product.
The look on their face and the words that we hear from is just, wow, I can't believe that this store has what you have.
To the dump.
To the dump.
To the dump.
Dump. Dump.
And welcome back to Politics Unplugged. We continue to look at the decision to rescind DACA, which has shielded up to 800,000 people here in the U.S. who were brought here as children from deportation. That includes 28,000 here in Arizona. And joining us now is State Representative Tony Navarrete, who also works with Promise Arizona, with more on how this is affecting the Latino community. Thank you very much for being here. And I just want to start. You just saw the interview with Brnovich, Attorney General Brnovich. You've seen what the U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions had to say. What's your take on this?
Yeah, well, I find it actually kind of hilarious what our state attorney general is stating in this process. And, you know, he has stated that he wasn't going to take any political cheap shots. And what we're seeing here is exactly that. The fact that he is going after dreamers, he's been silent practically this entire year when it comes to the Trump administration. And the fact that now he's going after dreamers and making sure that they are charged out-of-state tuition is simply disgraceful, quite frankly. And the fact that he's suing ABOR, which I find astonishing, you know, especially on the DACA side, is, and as well as Russell Pierce, you know, they're both like 2 peas in a pod. And we have to make sure that we're continuing to push back on politicians like this that are using young people as scapegoats.
Yeah, but what about this idea? You saw Attorney General say this, that he believes that the university presidents, a bunch of hypocrites, is what he said, because they are talking about, denying, talking about giving, dreamers in-state tuition, but yet they keep jacking up those tuition rates over 300% since 2002.
Correct. So on one part, when DACA became available back in 2012, that changed the political game, and that changed the tuition game as well, because now these young people were eligible for in-state tuition. The fact that tuition has increased in general is something that we should always be looking to. But over the past 10 years, the state government has actually taken close to $500 million away from our universities.
So let me ask you, too. We've seen some of the immediate reaction that we're seeing on social media. Some people are saying that Attorney General Brnovich is just trying to divert attention away from his DACA decision to go after that group of people by suing ABOR and the presidents over the tuition. Do you think this is a diversionary tactic?
It's definitely, it doesn't come at a good time, I can tell you that. But I do think that these are issues that need to be addressed. But at the end of the day, I do think that he's trying to distract from the fact that, you know, he's still going after DACA students. These are young people who are graduating, who are serving in our military, who have been educated in the state of Arizona. And, you know, they still have legal status here in the country, and they're going to continue to have legal status until their permits expire.
Well, speaking of that, I want to get back to the people of that. Now, obviously, there's a lot of there's personal stories about how this affects not only dreamers themselves, but everyone who knows them as well. And I want to play a little clip from somebody here just right now.
Because it's almost like if you feel like a political football being tossed around.
Growing up here, I grew up saying the Pledge of Allegiance, loving the flag, loving this country. I grew up being a Boy Scout, a Cub Scout, then a Boy Scout, and like that experience, no one's going to take that away, and that's what made me feel like an American.
This is definitely a scary time for me. You know, without DACA, there is this fear of like, will I be deported? Will I be a target? And it's sort of like hard to wake up every day with like feeling uncertain of how your future will look like.
Now, over the past, basically Congress has 6 months to come up with a fix. It seems like this is going to work itself out in some form, regardless of what Attorney General Brnovich does. Either Congress comes up with a plan, signs some sort of a bill like the DREAM Act that it failed to pass in the past, you know, and they get legal status here, they go to school. Or otherwise, you know, they don't, and the issue will be settled that way.
Correct, and we're hoping that something does get done in Congress. But, you know, the fact that the president manufactured a crisis here, putting the lives of over about 800,000 young students and dreamers on the line for this price is very, again, it's a disgraceful move that is is very unnecessary to pull the rug out from these young people. Again, some of those folks that I saw on the screen sharing their stories, you know, these are people that I've grown up with. These are folks that I've seen in my classrooms. These are folks that I've seen out in the community at my church. And not only myself, but also the faith community is behind them. The business community is behind them. And we need to make sure that we're passing policy and making sure that we're responsible as lawmakers to protecting all of the folks that are in our country and making sure that we're passing policies that are fair for all people.
All right, last question here. You saw the president's tweet, his last tweet on DACA this past week, where he just said basically DACA recipients don't have anything to worry about. Here it is, right there on the screen.
Yes, again, I'm not going to, at the end of the day, I hope the president moves to action and make sure that he does everything in his power to protect these young people. Again, these are folks that are serving in our military. These are individuals that are in hospitals, that are educators. These are folks that America wants. And these are folks that are living the American dream. And we have to make sure that we keep that dream available and alive.
All right. Well, thanks very much. We're going to have to take a quick break right now. We do have more on Politics Unplugged just ahead. And right after the break, Hurricane Irma gets political.
Because the bias is built in. So there is a desire to advance this climate change agenda. And hurricanes are one of the fastest and best ways to do it. You can accomplish a lot just by creating fear and panic.
What Rush Limbaugh had to say and do about this monster storm just ahead.
If you just sign that first
I'm
one
so
there.
sorry. I don't feel comfortable signing that.
I don't get the math here.
Was this the same car we talked about?
What's this dealer preparation fee?
I'm so sorry. This just is not
what we talked about.
Without the car salesman. Carvana.com, the better way to buy a car.
It's Express Flooring's Anniversary Flooring Sale. Get anniversary savings up to 70% on carpet, tile, wood laminate, or vinyl plank. Call Express today for fast, free in-home shopping on your schedule. Days, evenings, even weekends. And for a limited time, you get free carpet installation from Express Flooring, a 5-star company, and our lifetime installation warranty. Call during our anniversary sale and save.
Express Flooring is the best. Call 800 Express.
I'm Joe Brown from Accident Law Group. In an accident, call me right now. As a former insurance adjuster, I know what they'll do before they do it, and I will fight for you.
Joe made sure I knew exactly what was happening. It was great to know someone was on my side fighting for me.
I can help you like I helped Debbie and protect your rights. Call Accident Law Group now.
At Gila River Hotels and Casinos, there's more than one way to be a player.
You can play to win.
You can play in the sun.
Or for fun. Or you can play like there's no tomorrow.
With the card by Gila River Casinos, being a player means more. Earn points 10 times faster and redeem them at any Gila River Hotels and Casinos location.
So go ahead. Play on, player.
Life hacks for moms like you've never seen.
There are so many little things we could be doing to make life easier.
3TV's Tess Raffles shares her secrets for clearing clutter and saving time.
Totally doable, yeah. I think it's going to save tons of time in the morning.
Tips for working magic in the kitchen and bathroom. And her secret weapon?
Each kid will get to fold their own laundry.
Tess's tips, all this week on Good Morning Arizona. Only on 3TV.
Good job.
And welcome back to Politics Unplugged. It's now time to talk it out with our partners from First Strategic. And with us today, Barry Dill, Marcus Del Ortino. Thanks a lot for coming here. I want to jump right into this big announcement from Mark Brnovich here on tuition increase. Good move on his part at this point, or do you think this is some sort of diversionary tactic to take attention away from the fact that he is going after these dreamers, these young immigrants who are brought here, no fault of their own, and they might end up having to pay much higher tuition?
No, that's a laughable point, and I mean that from this standpoint. We have been talking about the price of tuition for years now at the legislature, and if you remember, Mark Killian almost sued on this issue and scared the pants off of a whole lot of people. It's high time that this discussion had to happen. And you know what? I agree with everything Mark Brnovich said. And he was on fire during that interview. But more importantly, I think that this will end up leading to a national discussion about student loans, student loan rates, default rates, and really this, what Rubio called the cartel of college education.
And I want to talk to you, too, about the people that are involved in this lawsuit, those 28,000 dreamers out there, or the ones, actually, there's about 300 of them that actually attend the 3 university schools here in Arizona, and how that might affect them. How do you think this is going to play out in Congress? Is Congress going to solve this? And are these students going to be affected at all?
Dennis, I think that this is an enormous burden to have put on these young people. I would be scared to death right now, and that's what the president has done, and now what I think the Attorney General has done is just put fear and uncertainty in these people's minds that they don't know what's going to happen. Fortunately, because of, I think, because of, and I hope, because of the politics of Washington, D.C. right now, the president may be siding with Democrats on some issues, that Congress will indeed get its business going and get this done and pass the DREAM Act.
Yeah, I mean, right now, there's not a whole lot of incentive to pass something like the DREAM Act in Congress, because I don't see the 2 leaders, the head of the House Speaker or the head of the Senate, actually moving forward on a bill that wouldn't have a majority of Republican votes on it.
Well, there's a lot of motivation now, because basically what Trump has said, you have 6 months to pass this bill. I think you're watching the motivation happen. If Congress fails once again on passing important legislation, they're going to have to live with that in the election box. And by the way, Trump knew that when he said that. If they don't, I think the President of the United States is going to issue another executive order. The problem with the executive orders, as we well know, is there's some constitutional issues with that, and that's the real deadline that was here. It was a constitutional deadline. But let me tell you, I do believe, and if you're looking at Donald Trump's tweets, that if Congress were to fail to act, that he would set up a system to keep DACA going, just to make Congress look like the fools that they are doing a great job.
One thing they did do is they did come up with a deal on the debt limit and raising the debt limit there, and to forestall basically a government shutdown. But Republican President Donald Trump actually, took a left turn this time and started working with Democrats on this issue, and a lot of Republicans are just fuming about this.
As my friend Marcus says often, Trump, first of all, is not a Republican.
Yeah, okay? Stop saying it.
He's a deal maker, but he's destroying from inside the gut of the Republican Party itself. And to make a deal, one of the best ways when you're making a deal is to allow the person that you really want to do a deal with to say, well, I really like the other guys better.
All right, let's move on. We teased this here ahead of the break, obviously. Hurricane Irma getting slightly political there. You saw Rush Limbaugh talking about how the severity of the storm was nothing but a great big hoax, but it turns out at the end of the week, he bailed. He got away. He's leaving his studios, which are located in Florida. I mean, does he come out here looking good or bad on this one?
He goes on radio and it criticizes climate change, and then it's like climate change said, "Here, hold my beer.
Yeah.
We got a hurricane coming."
But we do have about 15 seconds left. Kind of a more serious question. We've got a bunch of big hurricanes that are hitting and slamming into the United States this year. Is this going to change the debate on climate change?
It will eventually, yes, absolutely.
The fast discussion is going to be on insurance companies because of the effect that these storms are going to cause.
All right, guys. Well, that is all the time we have. But be sure to join us next week for more Politics Unplugged. Good night.